The problem today is that we don't preach process. We preach promises. So we have raised a generation of people who see God in promises, not process. So you go to church on Sunday and you hear about the promises of God, you go home to the process. And when you encounter the process, you say, well, God is not in this. That's right. And I would argue that God is more in the process than he is in the promise. I grew up, my sister who is here in the audience tonight, and I have one sister and one brother. I was the youngest one in my family, a family of 5. My parents migrated here from this, my parents migrated to West Virginia from Mississippi. My father was from Mississippi, my mother was from Alabama.
Okay.
My mother was an educator and my father was an entrepreneur who started a janitorial service. And we grew up in the 60s in the turbulence, very meager beginnings. In retrospect, I realized they were meager. At the time, I didn't know we were poor. They hid it from us because we were so filled with so many other things more important, like love and loyalty and a sense of connectivity and a family cohesiveness. At this age, my brother and my sister and I still live in the same city.
Do you really?
We're still together.
Still connected?
Yeah, we're still together. My mother, when she was dying, told us to stay together all the way to the end, and we have done that.
Wow.
Yeah.
Your father passed when
My father
you were
passed
young.
early. Yes.
Right?
Yeah.
Can you tell about how that happened, what happened, and how that impacted?
I think that probably had more to shape my ministry, had to do with shaping my ministry than anything else. He got sick when I was 10. He was a very big, robust sort of a man, very hardworking, strong work ethic sort of an individual, my superhero of sorts. He got sick, his blood pressure went up to 290 over 280.
Wow.
Shut down his kidneys. He had renal failure. They were in the early stages of dialysis. We were one of the first people in our area to start dialyzing, initially driving back and forth to Cleveland, Ohio. So I grew up in trauma, in crisis. And my mother was driving my father back and forth to Cleveland Clinic twice a week.
Twice a week.
And then we got our own kidney machine. And to be honest with you, I could run a kidney machine and couldn't ride a bicycle.
Well, my goodness. Because you were 10 years old when he was sick?
Yes. Okay. So my whole focus was about taking care of him. And so he lived till I was 16 years old, and then he passed away. And I think it, as tragic as it was, and it was tragic for me, it was traumatic because he died in the confusion of my adolescence. In the turmoil of who am I?
It's hard enough to be a 16-year-old.
Absolutely.
If everything is wonderful.
Yes.
But to have that happening.
Well, when you have that sickness in the home, it becomes the centerpiece of the family. And everything else has to be built around that. And you have to take a subordinate role because of the crisis. So being raised in crisis shaped my perception of what was important. And in some way or another, I have always been taking care of hurting people all my life. And so it is my default setting to go into that zone, whether it is spiritual pain, physical pain. All of my life has been in some way a caretaker. So ending up a shepherd of a church kind of makes sense for me. But it was the absence of my father and the aching void and the deep abyss of my confusion and alienation that created a thirst to find something to fill that chasm that he left. And I think that caused me to have a ravenous approach to God.
How do you explain that it didn't cause you to have a ravenous desire for drugs or for anger or bitterness? I mean, did
I passed by all of that.
Okay.
Yeah, on the way to Jesus. Yeah.
You waved?
Yeah, I passed by all of that on the way to Jesus. The thing was, there was a call on my life when I passed by those things that was disruptive and disturbing and unrelenting And I knew that I was here for a reason. I saw glimpses of my future, even before he died as a kid. Going to hear my mother speak, I would tell her, right now, I'm going to hear you speak, and they call me Miss Jake's son. The time will come, you'll come to hear me speak, and they'll call you Tom Jake's mother. But I didn't know I would be a preacher. I just knew, I saw glimpses of myself.
You could see that.
And yes, in front of a crowd and talking to people. I've always been fascinated by people. And I started out in church on the piano, playing for the choir.
Really?
And yeah, God tricked me. I thought I was going to be a gospel artist, but as I grew into the music realm, I noticed that people got more blessed over my introduction than they did my song. And I thought, maybe I need to scoot over a little bit this way, And destiny is something that we grope after. Providence and purpose is something that we see through a very dark glass. And some of the most momentous moments in my life, I stumbled into, groping to understand why am I here, and who am I really? And I think that those questions to me are more important than answers. Whether I come to a text, I never come to a text with what I know. I think that the smartest preacher is the one who comes to the text as a fool. And what comes out of that foolhardy humility is revelation knowledge. If you come to the text too smart, you have a preconceived idea of what it says, and you can't hear revelation because you hear too much information.
That's good.
Yeah,
That's good.
yeah.
You figured you got it all figured out.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And I started carrying my Bible when I was in high school.
Did you?
The latter years of high school, and they started calling me a boy preacher.
Did they?
And I was carrying my Bible trying to find, at moments I was trying to find God, and to be honest, at moments I was trying to find my father. And suddenly I realized that they were the same. Yeah, that he was not this supreme being that didn't have the capacity to be intimate, that he could be my father, that I could climb up into his arms, and that I could tell him my deepest, darkest secrets, and that I could trust him. And so relationship with him nurtured me more than religion. So there has always been some friction between religion and relationship. And though I grew up in the church, in a little Baptist church in West Virginia, and then later in a Pentecostal church in my teens, religion never could hide his face from me.
Good.
To the degree that I didn't see relationship as far more fulfilling and satisfying.
Yeah. Does it surprise you that you became a pastor? Looking back?
Yes. Oh, yes. For reasons I won't say on TV. Yeah, you talked about least likely to be in this situation. I mean, I was a terror as a little kid.
But your hometown. If we could somehow go back to the 10-year-old version of you, we wouldn't see no.
Scary, but inquisitive.
Yeah.
I believe that everything we ever become, we already were.
Yeah.
In seed form.
I'm with you.
And the acorns don't look like oak trees, but they're in there.
They're there. The design is in the seed.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
And so when I look back at my DNA and my propensity to lead, and my proclivity to talk, and my fascination with life, my mother used to say that the world is a university and everyone in it is a teacher. When you wake up in the morning, be sure you go to school. And I've been doing that all of my life. Yeah, I've learned from everybody I ever met, good or bad, right or wrong.
Yeah.
I learned something.
You're curious, aren't you?
Oh, extremely.
Curious.
Extremely.
Can you tell us about your mother?
For the rest of the night. I think I get my fight from my mother. My mother was a warrior. My mother graduated from high school when she was 15 years old, grew up in Marion, Alabama, went to school with Coretta Scott King.
Did she?
Yeah, sang in the choir when she knew the Scott family very well. got out of high school at 15 and did 4 years of college in 3 and came out with a double major and went to do her student teaching in Hattiesburg, Mississippi. Later on, when she was 50, went back and went after her master's in teaching children with learning disabilities. So my mother grew up quoting poetry and prose and poems to us and all of that sort of thing. And she didn't start teaching school until I was of age. And so she went from teaching school to being eventually the Equal Employment Opportunities Representative for the state of West Virginia.
Is that right?
She was smart. She was strong. She did not believe in you giving up and breaking down and letting go. And she took, get yourself together. You know what I mean? And every time, even to this day, every time I feel myself about to give way to the stress and the pressures of my life, I can hear my mother's voice in my head saying, "Get yourself together. Sit up there. Don't you let them throw you over there." You know, she was like a coach. And
Really?
some of that is in my preaching. Sometimes I can hear her voice in my preaching, that relentless tenacity not to allow the vicissitudes of life to overwhelm your soul comes from more than faith in God. It comes from fervor in the human spirit that has been modeled in front of you by the people who went before you. There are so many people sitting in this chair right now. It's a wonder it doesn't fall to the floor. My mother,
You've got a whole
here,
legacy.
my father sitting here, my grandmother, my great-grandmother, my great-great-grandmother who was a slave named Nancy Jakes that I remember. She's sitting in this chair with me.
Really?
My great-great-grandfather, Willie Smiley, whose mother was a slave and died when he was 103 years old, he's sitting here with me too.
Yeah.
I am the sum total of hundreds of people who shaped my life, and they are gone physically, but they all left indentations on my soul.
A whole legacy.
Absolutely. And I think that's true of all of us.
Well, it is.
All of us are the sum total of small deposits that are made by the people who passed by us along the way.
Yeah. I know we're going to get to the book. But I'm still curious. You know, there are people who grew up in a simple background, had their share of challenges, not as many as you, but they had their challenges. And yet they come out angry or bitter, bitter toward God, bitter toward the world. They anesthetize their pain rather than deal with their pain. In your book, Crushing, you talk about how if we believe in a sovereign God, we can see that these are ordained struggles that make us the people that we are.
Right.
Where did you pick up on that? I mean, if you hadn't have known that, Bishop, you might have become bitter.
Some of it came from not being allowed to feel sorry for yourself.
Yeah.
Some of it came from my mother's relentless, tenacious commitment to you standing up. Some of it came through being born. I was born in between 2 dead babies.
Oh my.
The one before me and the one after me died. I was the one that lived.
Okay.
And so I learned early that life was precious. And then my father died when I was 16.
Yeah.
And that there's nothing like lowering your father in the ground to make you breathe life more deeply, as if you might not have tomorrow.
Right.
Because now you're aware you could possibly not have tomorrow. My greatest birthday was my 49th birthday because he died when he was 48, and when I became 49, I broke the curse. So that was a great thing for me to do that. This whole notion and this fidelity that I have with the scriptures, and particularly with the whole crushing thing, came while I was sitting out on the terrace. I got this word from the Lord that comes to me in the strangest kind of way, that the seed of the woman would bruise the head of the serpent, and the serpent would bruise his heel. And there, sitting out on the terrace, I saw in my spirit the bruised heel of Jesus. and then the next flash, I saw the stained feet of women stomping grapes in the wine press. And the bruised heel of Jesus and the stomping of the feet on the crushing of the grapes brought me to the Passover cup. And he said, this is the New Testament in my blood. Right. And suddenly I recognized his affinity to the grape, that the grape itself would tell us that the only way to extract the most valuable part of the grape was for it to be crushed. And the only way to get the essence of Christ was for him to be crushed. And out of that crushing comes the revelation that crushing is not a destination. You don't get stuck in it. It's transportation. It's transportation. I don't know anybody who ever became major in any area of life, not just church, any area of life, who was not propelled by the force of some level of crushing.
Yeah.
Something that could have killed you and should have killed you became the catalyst and the urgency through which you evolved into the highest expression of who you were meant to be.
Can I read you what you said?
Sure. It's going to sound better when you read it.
No. Listen to this. Crushing places revealed that there is more to our lives than we had planned. The truly invaluable, marvelous, and eternal aspects of our identity and ultimate destiny are displayed in us there. It is in the midst of painful crushing that we realize that the blessing found in the production of fruit in our lives was never the Master's end goal. Our latest crop of fruit was merely part of an ongoing greater process.
Yes, sir.
What you're helping us do, at least what you helped me do, I think all of us, is you're helping me interpret the tough times of my life, right? You're telling me that there's a plan, that there's a purpose, and that I'll get through them.
Absolutely.
I'll be better on the other side of them.
Absolutely.
Am I?
Yes, sir.
You're
You're hitting it exactly right. And I am telling you that the greatest part of you is still somewhere down inside of you, and only pressure will get it out.
Only pressure.
Yeah, that you have not seen who you are in the pleasant moments when you smell the blossoms on the vine and feel the sun drench on your face, that you were raised not to be fruitful, but to be crushed.
Ooh.
The grapes, when
I wish I could highlight that sentence.
Listen to the old silver tongue himself. The grape is one of the few fruits that is raised to be crushed.
Look at that.
You know, with crushing in mind.
Yeah.
Christ was born to die. Anything short of that would have been failure. That's why when Peter tried to stop the crucifixion, he called him a devil and said, "Get behind me." And he called Judas friend because he understood that he was raised like the grape to be crushed. And so he did not, the Bible says that Jesus set his face to go to Jerusalem, but he did not rest his head until it was on the cross. And understanding that for this purpose came I into the world. And not that you love suffering. He despised the shame.
Right.
He despised the shame. But for the joy that was set before him. So he looked beyond the crushing and he saw the wine. You see, and understanding that wine is taking that grape into its most powerful expression. And it is putting it in its most eternal form. And life crushes us from time to time because nothing else will get out of you the hidden treasure that we have locked up in earthen vessels, but to be crushed.
Amen. Amen. Are we ever beyond crushing? Do you ever live long enough where you can say, "Oh, good, I've got all the crushing behind me. It's just harvest from now on"?
You know the funny thing about it, I think periodically, wherever there is purpose and wherever there is resistance to that purpose, pressure releases us from that resistance. And the more that we yield to the process. But the problem today is that we don't preach process. We preach promises.
Yeah. Yeah.
So we have raised a generation of people who see God in promises, not process. So you go to church on Sunday and you hear about the promises of God, you go home to the process. And when you encounter the process, you say, well, God is not in this.
That's right.
And I would argue that God is more in the process than he is in the promise. Yeah.
Is everybody taking notes? You can say amen. He's in the process more than the promises. In fact, the promises only make sense because of the process.
When you pass through the waters, I'll be with you.
Yeah.
When you go through the fire, I'll be there.
Yeah.
His promise is to be with you in the process. And there are things that you cannot learn about him until you are in the process. There is a revelation of his glory that only comes in the frustration and the disruption of your life. He said, I'm a present help in trouble. If you avoid the trouble, you'll avoid me. The literal language, Jehovah Shammah, I am present in trouble. I am revealed in trouble. I show myself strong. When men forsake me, then the Lord will take me up. See, so it was good for me that I have been afflicted. Had I not been afflicted, I would have never known the glory of God.
Exactly
so all through the Bible keeps, the very symbol of our faith is a crushing place, a cross, an emblem of suffering and shame. It's not a crown.
No.
You know, it's not a crown. It's not a throne. It's a cross.
It's a cross.
Who makes an invitation from a cross but Jesus?
Yeah.
You know, you make an invitation, you say, come go to Hawaii, you know, let's go to Switzerland. Jesus says, come on, let's go to the cross. That's a hard invitation. Take up your cross and follow me. Come on, let's die.
Yeah.
You know, who wants to go do that, okay? If the only way you can follow that kind of request is to know that what is on the other side is greater than anything that was before it. And understanding that is what this book is all about. And let me just interject one thing quickly, because we've talked about graphic, overt crushings, but I want to warn the audience about invisible crushings that come from forces that you cannot see, like stress and heartbreak and pain. Nobody has to be sick or lock you up, or you don't have to come out of prison for you to be crushed by stress. Science teaches us that the same part of our body that reacts to physical pain, the same signal goes to your brain from emotional pain. It sends out the same stimuli throughout the neurological system when your heart is broken, as if it would if your leg was broken.
Really?
So you don't necessarily have to incur physical injury to be crushed by emotional stress. And we're living in a time of unseen forces bearing down on our soul on a daily basis. Everything is going so fast. Technology, social media, we've got everybody saying everything about everything all of the time. And the whirlwind that we're in right now is the wine press. The whirlwind, the spinning, the mad spinning of our lives causes the centrifugal force of being spun around causes pressure all by itself. And in that fast pace that we live in, there is a certain amount of invisible pressure. And the strange thing about it is you feel the pain, you sense the pressure, and you can't see the source. So all of a sudden, you're getting the impact as if there were an assailant. But there's no assailant that you can see.
Can't lash out.
And God says you can either see it as the wine press, or you can see it as the potter's wheel. But the more it spins, the more he touches it, and the more it changes in the spinning. And if you are not prepared for disruption, then you're not prepared for resurrection. Yeah.
Not prepared for disruption.
Yeah.
You're not prepared for resurrection.
Yeah.
What I hear you saying to us is is don't try to escape your troubles.
No.
But lean into them.
Lean into it.
Lean into them.
Lean into it.
And say, God, what are you telling me? What are you teaching me? Consider it all joy, my brethren.
Yes, sir.
When you face various trials and tribulations.
Yes.
Yeah.
And I'll be honest, that's not, somebody said, that's not easy to do. No. It's not something that you do from the place of your emotions. It's something that you do from the place of your teaching. I went through a period in my life that I was just being crushed. My heart was broken. I was worried. It was one of the most distraught moments in my life. And I was literally crying when I told God this. I said, Lord, I hate this. I absolutely hate this. But I love you. And I know you would not allow me to go through this if it were not for my good. And though tears are running down my face and I cannot see my way out, if you suffered me to be bruised, it is only to make me better. And so I trust you when I can't trace you.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because he that hath began a good work in me
will bring it to completion.
Shall bring it to completion. You cannot convince me.
Yeah.
You cannot convince me that he's not for me. And whatever he ordered for me to face, when it's all over, it has got to end for me. Because I am, the relationship that I am the most secure of is him. And the reason I am so secure is there's nothing about me that he has not considered.
From start to finish.
From start to finish. All things are naked before him with whom we have to do.
Yeah.
You know, I could disappoint my wife or disappoint my children or disappoint my mother. They could find out something about me and change their mind about me. God could never find out anything about me.
Cannot be surprised.
Yeah, he cannot be surprised. There's nothing about me that he doesn't already know. He's already made up his mind about me.
He has rendered his verdict.
He has rendered his verdict, and there is therefore now no condemnation.
No condemnation.
Yeah. So whatever he ordered for me to go through in process,
right.
Well, yea, though you walk through the valley of the shadow of death, and you fear no evil, for thou art with me, thy rod and thy staff, they comfort me. Thou preparest a table before me in the presence of my enemies. Thou anointest my head with oil. My cup runneth over. You can't have the run over if you don't go through the valley of the shadow of death.
Yeah.
And listen at hope screaming in his ears in the darkest moments of his life. Surely. Not maybe, not hopefully, but surely, goodness and mercy shall follow me all the days of my life. And when it's all over, I'm going to dwell in the house of the Lord forever. I love that.
That's good.
I love
That's good. That's good.
Yeah. So when we stand, you and I, over short caskets and small graves and children burned in fires, it isn't always possible to explain suffering. Yeah. It isn't always possible to make people rejoice in that type of agony. I teach people, just survive it.
That's what we have to do.
Just survive it. Don't try to understand it.
Right.
Just survive it. Yeah. Because if you survive it, on the other side of it, you're going to see something that makes it, in retrospect, make more sense than it does today.
It does, doesn't it? It does.
Looking back at the rearview mirror, it's not that it was ever a wonderful thing to go through, but had my father not died when he did, I wouldn't be who I am. His death was the birth of my ministry. You see, and the seeds always hint to us that life comes out of death. As the outer encasement corrodes in the ground, the inner life bursts forth. Yeah. And everything that dies in you is only so that something else can be born in you.
Yeah. It occurred to me once that the reason that God can that he allows us, he permits these seasons of sufferings to come. You refer to this in your book as well, and that is just the intense brevity of this life. It seems like it's going to last forever.
Right.
When I turned 60, which kind of a long time ago now, as I stop and think about it, my 3 daughters and 2 son-in-laws came over for a party, and what I wanted from them for my birthday was 20 minutes of undivided attention. And so they had to listen. I gave them no option. And I took this rope, Bishop, this thick rope that you use to tie up boats, you know, those big, thick.
Yes.
I went down to a store and bought it. And I took the rope and I tied it to a piece of furniture. And then I opened the patio door and I threw it over the balcony as if the rope was disappearing. And I gave each of them a black marker. And I said, pretend that this is my eternal existence. Okay, this is Lucado's eternal existence. You can't see it. It goes on for infinity. And I gave each one of them a marker, and I said, now could you indicate my earthly life on this rope? And they're used to me doing these odd things. You know?
Right.
And then they realized, and one of them said, Dad, we can't make the dot tiny enough. It cannot be tiny enough.
Wow.
And we talked in that little devotional about how the Apostle Paul talks about these brief and momentary struggles.
Yeah.
Well, they don't seem like it when we're in the middle.
No, they don't at
But
all.
our Heavenly Father looking on us says, you know, Lucado, you can go through 2 or 3 years of hardship because of the good. Because of the good it's going to give the kingdom and your character. But then also, it's not that long.
No.
It's not that long.
No, it is not that long. And you cannot allow it to be that long.
That's right.
You know, one of the things I tried to convey in the book, some people refuse to get well. You know, they refuse recovery. They refuse.
That was the question of Jesus to the pool of Bethesda, right?
Right.
Do you want to get well?
Do you want to get well? Some people refuse recovery because they have built a system around dysfunction.
Yeah.
And dysfunction becomes comfortable. I got my cup, I got my coat, and I'm prepared to be blind.
I got my 3 square meals a day.
Yeah. So I'm going to sit by the side of the road and shake my cup and wear my coat, and then Jesus comes and disrupts it all.
Yeah.
And the cup has to fall and the coat has to drop that blind Bartimaeus may be healed. And it is the urgency of a fleeting moment. The escape out of pain is a fleeting moment. It is passing by. And if you're not willing to come out of your coat and drop your cup and step into that moment blindly, without understanding it, without somebody apologizing, without somebody coming back and making it right, this is not about them, this is about you. This is about you. This is about the moment of your liberation that when you get, I never will forget when in the middle of my mother's funeral, one of my dear friends came down and I said, I want you to be prepared to preach it. She always wanted me to, but I don't think I can. I said, but if something happens in the service and a breath of grace blows by my face, I'll step into it and do it. And in the middle of my pain, this window of grace opened up that gave me the strength, and I stood up and walked up there and preached my mother's funeral. I felt like a little boy who had done a good job on his Easter speech. You know, I did. I was now there. Because the grace to escape is a fleeting moment. And you have to take that grace rather than to refuse to recover only because you languish in the attention of the mourners who come by your side to help you stay incapacitated. Blind Bartimaeus knew that if Jesus kept walking by, he would have died blind. That was his last walk past that road.
Yeah.
And if he didn't get it right then, he wasn't going to get it. And whether it comes through a song or a friend or a message, when he calls you, harden not your heart, you have to receive that right then and say, I'm coming out. And not feel guilty that you came out and not feel ashamed that you came out and not stay in for the benefit of people who have built their lives around your pain. Because there are people who make a job of you being afflicted.
It's where they get their identity.
That's where they get their identity, and they need to be needed, so they need you to stay broken. And so you have to have the courage to get back up again. You have the courage to rise up in the cup. The thing about wine is that it swells.
Say that again.
The thing about wine is that it swells. And that's why you can't put new wine in old skins, because it swells. You see, you know. And so when that moment to escape comes, you can't be encapsulated by something that is inflexible. And sometimes the people we build around us are old skins who won't give us breathing room to swell to our capacity. And they love you as long as you stay on a certain level.
Right. As long as you fit in their box.
Right. That's what I'm talking about. About crushing causes you to expand. I'm bigger through everything I went through.
Yeah.
I'm stronger through everything I went through. I'm tougher through everything I went through. Everything I suffered in West Virginia prepared me for everything I would go through in Dallas.
Wow, that's good.
Yeah.
That's good.
So what was painful in West Virginia, I became grateful for in Dallas because I thought, that's nothing. You know, I saw that. That's elementary school stuff right there. You know, and so God lets Moses practice his miracles in private before he brings him before Pharaoh. And so God sets us up in situations that are non-threatening so that we can practice, so that in the day of confrontation, we have some experience at handling this moment.
Yeah. Joseph.
Yeah.
Joseph.
What's better than that?
He was tested in his affliction.
Yes, sir.
Right? He was tested in his affliction.
Absolutely.
And don't you know that the reason that Joseph could be strong is because he could look at his brothers and say, what you intended this for evil, but God intended it for good.
Yes.
And what I see in your life that I admire so much is that you have kept that but God in the middle of your story.
Absolutely.
A lot of people want to get it out. You intended evil for me. And it stops right there.
Right.
That's where their story stops.
I think, you know, I knew we were going to do this. I think that's why God chose him. Of all the brothers, I think that's why God blessed him, because Joseph had the capacity to bless somebody who had hurt him.
Yeah.
See, when you start talking about wine, you have to talk about capacity, because growth is there. And Joseph exemplified the capacity to be bigger than his situation.
Yeah.
And so to him whom much is given, much is required.
Yeah.
And I really believe with all of my heart, when you read through the story of Joseph, his greatest strength was his ability to love those who had victimized him.
Because when he saw him, he wept.
That's
Remember,
right.
before he disclosed, before they recognized who he was?
That's right.
He had to step out and weep. His heart was so tender.
That's right. I actually think that when he said you meant it for evil, but God made it good, I think he was trying to comfort them, not chasten them.
I think you're right.
Yeah, I think
you're right.
It's okay. It's okay.
It's okay.
It's okay. You meant it for evil, but I'm okay.
Yeah.
God made it good.
Yeah.
I still got there.
Yeah.
You know, when you take your story away from the people who hurt you and determine in your heart, whatever you did, it's okay. I still got there.
Yeah.
You won't have any reason to be bitter.
There you go.
In fact, it's not just that I got there in spite of you. In many ways, I got there because of you.
Because of you.
Yeah, because
you didn't know it, but you were helping me.
You were helping me.
You were teaching me.
You were helping me.
training
You were teaching me. You were training me. You were preparing me, and I have this capacity because you stretched me.
God gives us an ability to reinterpret our past, doesn't He?
Yeah.
Rather than see our past as rather than see ourselves as victims of a difficult past, He gives us the grace to look back and say, oh, okay, our sovereign Lord was at work even in that.
Even in that.
Even in that.
If God spared not his own son.
But gave him up for us all.
But gave him up for us all. Who am I to think that I am above going through anything, you know.
Why not me?
Job says, the Lord knows the way that I take. And when he has tried me, I shall come forth as pure gold. I may be in the fire right now.
Shall come forth.
Yeah, but I shall come forth as pure gold. And I think that if you can keep the promise of the wine with you while you are being crushed under the feet, that this is not my final form, that though I stain the feet of those who oppress me now, this is not my final form. There is something coming out of me that's greater than what is hurting me. And what is coming out of me, you will never be able to stop. If you can keep that in your mind, you will understand why Christ came to the Garden of Gethsemane, to prepare him for the cross, to remind himself that crushing is all that he was going through, that the secretions of what was in him was better than the pressures that oppressed him.
Wow.
And I'm hoping to write this book to somebody who has something in them that they could not get out any other way. And I want them to understand that pressure turns to power when God does suppress it.
That's going to be good.
She said.